Hi everyone, I'm Jesse. I'm the president of the Verona Area Historical Society. I think I've met a lot of you. And I had the pleasure of going through some of the old files, recordings and things, and kind of throwing together the best outline I could of the early days of what was this wonderful big building and organization we're in. What was it at the start and how did it become? Because like a lot of cool community organizations, it starts small with some very, very dedicated people and then grows into, you know, this lovely big building. And I have two kids here. They come here all the time. I came, I wouldn't say here, over to East Harriet Street when I was in school in the 80s and 90s. So for me, it's been a very personal thing too. And I hope you'll enjoy this. It was fun going back. And I mean, what's cooler than black and white pictures? Nothing's cooler than to take your iPad and throw it in the garbage. Nothing's cooler than a black and white picture and a person who knows what's in it, to me. So, let's see here. Oh, quick thank you. Rhonda Everson is one of the people who works at the library who maintains this collection of these old articles and things, all clipped and cataloged. There have been a lot of volunteers over the decades. I think Doreen Stewart was one of them who have gone through Verona presses and clipped things. And I want to thank them because I use that heavily. Also, Alice, Ken, and Carl each wrote a Verona history book that I used a lot for this. So I just want to let you know. I wasn't here for most of this, so I have to give credit to the people who actually wrote it all down and kept track of stuff. Is there anyone here under 20? No one here? Okay, sometimes we get kids. I have the crayons out. I thought, so we're all in the same boat here. We remember life before the internet. Just in case there are any kids here, I wanted to quick mention, because while a library is really important for so many community reasons, I think there was an extra importance, even more back 50, 100 years ago. So I went back and I found a picture. Here's a Verona classroom, and about 100 years ago, the Verona grade school. And I know if my kids were here, or if there were kids here, they would be like, something's missing. There we go. That was a lot better. This is what my classroom was like. Now you got an iPad, you got your desktop, you got your smart board. I mean, I thought markers were cool and chalk and white, but now you got your smart board you touch. Well, here, I'll make it legit. I'll make it black and white. There, now it fits. So I just wanted to point out that when we hear, and this became apparent to me when I read these stories about Alice and Rel starting the library, like there was this need where, sure, you got your daily events through the newspaper, maybe the radio, but if you wanted to learn a trade, if you had to do research, and you didn't have a library, you were kind of out of luck, unless you knew someone who knew the thing, which, and that I think is different now, where information comes to you more than it used to, but man, was that important. Okay, so just to compare, our library was hard fought, I learned. This was not something that someone went to a council meeting and said, hey, we should have a library. Okay, cool. And it was built. Oh no, people really fought for this building we're in and all of its predecessors. So I wanted to compare that to some of our neighboring communities. So just for perspective, 1847, town of Verona is established. 1874, Madison gets their first free library, the public library. And by the way, this is interesting, it was the mayor pushed for it and it opened in City Hall. So remember that when you hear some of the difficulties we had, that it was actually Madison mayor that pushed for this. Okay, 1876, one of our neighbors, Mount Horeb, has their first lending library. There's horses in front of it. That's how long the horses parked in front of the library. Now we go to 1908, Oregon got their first lending library. There it is over there, more modern photo. Village of Verona came 1921, still no library. We had our neighbors have them, but we didn't. Middleton, 1926, they have a library. We don't yet. 1947-ish, you're going to learn we got our first, what you would call a public library. There was a traveling library before there that would come around to communities with books on like a cart. And then, well, we beat Fitchburg. Okay, so Fitchburg a little bit after us, but that's for their presentation. They can go into that. Okay, so what did we have? I went back, and this was in, I believe, Alice's book. So 1930, let's talk about our little one-room schoolhouses. Maple Grove, 1911, about 20 years later. This was a fellow, Herb Kitsky, who talked about, our library basically was 2 bookshelves, 5 to 6 feet with books on it. That was the school library. So that's like me laying on my side minus 4 inches, if you can imagine. So not huge. Our first high school was 1899. It was in the Woodman Hall, which was about a block off of Miller's. And this is a look back to what their library was. You could only one student could go to it at a time. There was only one book. It was the dictionary. I'm going to go to the library. All right, I'm back from the library. Who wants to go next? I also love, because it is around Halloween, look at this last sentence. Only one could go to the bathroom at a time. There was room for 2, but the goblins tipped the bathroom over on Halloween. John, how do I tip over a bathroom? I can't tip that bathroom over. You know why. We're going to meet 2 people here at the beginning. One is Alice, one of my Verona history heroes. And this is her wedding photo over there, and that's Bill Sr. Now, who was Alice? She was a newspaper correspondent for Verona. She wrote in the Cap Times, the State Journal, I think a Middleton paper, little things about what was happening in Verona. This is long before the Verona Press. So there she is with her little typewriter and her wedding dress, pounding away. She was so dedicated. Bam, bam, bam. She's not going to stop to get married. She was also wrote our first Verona history book. There was an 1877 Dane County history, but this was our first 1947, our 100-year anniversary. She sat down and interviewed the sons and daughters of the pioneer families for their memories of coming to Verona. And without this, we would have almost nothing from these people. So this was a gift. There we go. We're going to tuck it over there under her news or typewriter. She was very involved civically. There she is, America. She founded the Women's Auxiliary Legion. Was founded in her living room in 1939. So this kind of paints a picture of who Alice was. Cared a lot about community. Cared a lot about veterans. Her name comes up all over the place. When we had our centennial parade in 1947, she went and found relatives of the original settlers to put in there. And I should mention too, just to give her husband a little credit, and of course the story of the library, which is one of her biggest, I think, legacies, if you will, to Verona. I should mention her husband Bill Sr. was a World War I veteran, so he did some stuff too, some cool stuff. And that probably helped, I guess, fuel her appreciation for, I think, the armed forces. So there's Bill. And their son, Bill Jr., still lives here in Verona. Okay, so another person to meet, Ralph. And Ralph's grandson, Jeff, is here today. Ralph is a pretty cool cat. He was born in Milwaukee, moved to Madison, moved to Verona in 1941. He did real estate. He had this tree farm, and his wife Solveig had this little gift shop over on Peavey. Who remembers the Jacobs gift shop? Oh my gosh, it's like 6, 7, that's awesome. There it is, there's some pictures of it. He also, when he got to Verona, he noticed something. Something was wrong, something was missing. But what's cool is, all right, any kids here yet? I hear kids out there. I wanted to ask anyone under like 20 if they knew what this was. Okay, with all this stuff in the library, there's a box of cassette interviews from the 70s and some of them in the 80s. Someone sat down with Ralph in 1980 and interviewed him about the early days of the library. So what I like about this is, I could tell you Ralph's story, or he could tell you his story.
I first moved to Verona in the summer of 1941. When I looked around Verona, I was amazed to find that they didn't have any library facilities, whatever. I inquired about it, and several people told me, oh, we did get a box of books from the traveling library, and then we had a heck of a job getting them together to send them back. And so we stopped it. I couldn't quite believe it, since I had come from Milwaukee and then recently Madison, where they had excellent library services. So I thought I'd better test the water a little to see if there wasn't any real demand. My wife was active at St. James Sunday School at the time, so I got a box of books from the traveling library and took them up to the Sunday school. And they were eagerly snapped up and promptly returned, so I was satisfied that if books were available, there would be quite a demand beyond that which the different schools furnished.
So we get an idea of the first kind of momentum that gathered behind this library. And I found some of the other articles talking about the traveling library. I think that was Alice had brought some books here and passed them around, and it sounds like what Ralph had heard was it was hard getting them back, so they kind of, didn't do it that often. Something else from the 40s, mid-early 40s, was gas rationing. So this was obviously for the war effort, gas was very scarce and being conserved, so you had a certain number of stamps you could use for gas every week. Ralph and some others formed an entertainment committee in Verona, which was what can we do to keep kids from using gas and people having entertainment here. And they came up with a committee, one person from every business in town sent a representative, and once a week, for several years, they would have a entertainment night in the old high school, where they would show movies, films, they'd have a jukebox with dances, and then upstairs, Lee Thompson was a fellow who manned a box of books. And Ralph is so proud in this interview that with the dancing and the movies, he said about 15 people a week would go up and check a book out and then bring it back. So he was like, there is demand for this. John, did you ever go to those entertainment nights? You were here in the 40s.
Yes.
Did you dance or did you read books?
I didn't read any books.
No. Ralph's grandson is crying over here, John.
I go, John.
Okay, we'll give you a pass on that. I love too, by the way, I love the propaganda posters. When you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. I rode alone to the library. I didn't realize Hitler was there. Wow. Cool. So that was another thing that kind of helped start this momentum. So next up, they posted in the newspaper, is anyone interested in forming a public library? And Ralph says few were the ones who remembered. There were other people too who responded. There was Etta D, who was a grade school teacher, Bess Littleton, Miriam Lamansky, who I think recently passed in the last few months. This is her. She had a degree in library science, and she was a former assistant director of the library at the University of Iowa. So Ralph got some big guns here. And then of course Alice, Ralph, a few others. And as he says, this became, sorry, can you guys hear me in the back? I might not be using this enough. This became the library board without any further ado. So this was our board. That was it. The people who replied to the library. About 1947-ish, there was this building out in the corner. Here's a photograph of what it is today. It's where Walgreens is on the main intersection in town. This building would be pretty much where that sidewalk is. It was right there on the street. And around this time, the post office, which was in the southwest part, had left. The bank was still in the other part. You can see the capital, $15,000 was their capital, which I think I had that on me right now. Like that was a big thing, like back then. Now Alice saw an opportunity here, and she was part of the Women's Auxiliary, which she started, and Ralph was part of the PTA. And Alice went to the village board and said, "Can we use this? Can you pay for our heat? Can you pay for our lights, and make this a library?" And they said no. And that's the end of our story. Everyone go to bed and grab a cookie on your way out. No, she didn't take no for an answer. She had to go again and again. We know she went at least twice. She went back. This time she put the helmet on. And she went back and said, no, we need a library in this town. There's all these reasons we need it. And they go back. And she was successful. Here's an article that talks about what she asked for. She wanted light, heat, and space. The auxiliary had to pay the rent. But they had 13 by 36 feet. I meant to bring a ruler. 13, what's here to the end of that table? 36, maybe the second. That's not very big, but it was bigger than what they had previously. And that was the first brick and mortar Verona library. Let's get back to Ralph here. Ralph remembers this. So they still had to pay the rent for it. How were they going to manage this? Ralph tells that story about how they managed that.
It happened that the bank had vacated the room where they had their vault, and that was available. And I persuaded Alec Miller Sr. to rent it to us for a nominal sum. I believe we paid $15 a month. And since we didn't have any source of revenue of our own, I found a recording place to practice, and he paid us $18 a month. I think the bank was a little miffed to find out that we were cashing in on their conservative rental. But anyway, that was our arrangement for several years.
Crafty guy. He was a real estate agent, you say? Oh, okay, yeah, crafty dude.
Alice Kunstman was a faithful supporter of the library. With her association with the Legion Auxiliary, she hustled around and got donations of lumber and paint and some help, and got some shelving set up so that we were in business.
There you go. So two really dedicated people. By the way, that whole interview is on our website. If you go to veronahistory.com, go interviews, you can listen. It's about 25 minutes. He tears through the whole, and it's the whole thing. These are just like little snippets of it. That he mentioned, did he mention the safe? Okay, he's going to mention the safe. So this was a bank building. There was a massive safe in part of it that, according to one account, he couldn't open, and they couldn't move. And it was taking up space in their 13 by 39 or whatever it was. And
first I explored the possibility of pulling the vault out, but they said it was too heavy and it would destroy the front end of the building and it wasn't practical. So then I tried to bribe Kaltenberg, who was doing the work around there, and I said, couldn't you just cut some of the braces underneath? And I think gravity will do it. It'll sink to the basement, and then we'll have that space with just a little flooring over it. And, well, he felt that was a little risky. And we never did get the vault out of the library.
Awesome. That's kind of a funny little story, I guess. Well, it's nice to have an old bank. I found this article, 1947, June, that talks about the library opening up, the Women's Auxiliary, former post office. They had 250 books, so keep that in mind. your mind. They were looking for books, chairs, and tables from donors. They needed everything donated. And then there's Ralph and Miss William, who is Alice Kunzman. Oh, I always enjoy looking back at these old newspapers, seeing other things on the page. Apparently, in 1947, pleated skirts were highlighted. So that's it. Anyone wear a pleated skirt back in the 40s? John, put your hand down. Anyone wear it? In the 50s and 60s. Okay, I think that's kind of cool. Like, the fashion from the era. Okay, so 1956-ish, something else happens in this building. The bank leaves. They build their building, which is now the Bank of Cross Plains, which is just a little bit to the north, and they've been there ever since. I think the police department moved in here next, based on what I've read in all the articles and the books. But that part comes important soon. Okay, so 56-ish, the bank leaves the other half. Feel free to correct me afterwards if I'm getting any of this totally wrong, anyone who actually lived it. 59, 57-ish, depending on the resource, the village actually took over the library. Now it was being run as part of the village. The Mount Vernon Telephone Company had, in the past, been in the upper floor. They had one of those cool operator things there where they would connect calls. That left at about 57, 59 and moved to their building across the street. Little snippet here, 62, it was open for 6 hours a week. It was still renting out to the accordion player and the lawyer. There was a lawyer there as well, I forgot to mention. They said that the lawyer would sometimes be working on a case and people would knock on the window with books to return after hours and he'd like help them out. And they would tell them when the hours were. I think that's kind of funny. Shelves were still made by hand, everything was still donated. Personal typewriters used. So I found 3 different years for when it joined the Dane County Library System. So it was somewhere around 67, 68. And then something happened in the mid-1960s. Verona Avenue was getting bigger and was flooding a lot. So here are some articles. There's the safe, by the way. So for scale, this is probably a full-size volume of something there. If you can imagine like 4 or 5, this is pretty big. It's probably as tall as I am, probably about this wide. And that was just wasted space they couldn't even use. But it was cool to find a picture of that in one of Rhonda's articles. All right, so growing pains. Now, Marge Westergaard, who knew Marge? Raise your hand if you knew Marge. A lot of people knew Marge. She was interviewed, or she wrote an article in 2004 with her memories of that period of time. And I don't have a tape of her, unfortunately, but I just have some quotes. She said, the village and state were beginning to widen the road. The steps of the building were torn off, and temporary steps were built to the north. So it was getting harder. These were gone. It was getting harder to get in there. At that time, due to construction, we had no heat in the library. As the weather grew colder, we had to wear boots, coats, and gloves. Needless to say, it was not easy to type catalog cards that way. And what's awesome is, here's a picture of that. So here's Shirley Gutneck. She was a librarian. This was on the back of the picture. There's earmuffs, mittens prior to moving from the old thing. So that doesn't look fun. It looks pretty cold. Around 1965, here they are talking about the space crunch again. I love this quote from Alice. It shows up several times, that she was told by the village board, no one's going to read books. TV is coming out. Everyone's going to be watching TV. I feel like 5 or 7 years ago, it was like, no one's going to touch books because we have e-readers. And it's like all these things. And well, Alice was right. She said, don't worry, they're going to keep reading books. Here's a little picture of the inside, 65, the inside of the bank area. Pretty crowded. Some more statistics. By 65, we're up to 5,376 books, 1,300 card holders in Verona, which was still pretty small then. Here we are talking about the upcoming move. So this is where it says the police department went to the Sharp House. I think when the police department left, the library either expanded into that other half or moved over there. I'm not sure which of those two it did, but I definitely know that they used the police department space off to the east. Or the north of the building. And someone can correct me afterwards if you know more than I did. Yeah, so the police department moved. It's now moving into the corner room. There's Mrs. Gutneck. Is it Gutneck, Ruth? Am I saying that right?
Gutneck.
Gutneck, thank you. Gutneck, cool. It's good to have experts in the room. And here she is wondering, how are we going to clean up the space and use it? This is where we go back to Marge, Thanksgiving 67-ish. She says, space became available in a storefront shared with Main Cafe. And that's now Toot and Kate's. It's this building. That was the old Kunzman building. It was torn down. This is what's there now. Since the library shared it with Main Cafe, they moved over there. Oh, I forgot. I skipped a part there. On Thanksgiving weekend, the Boy Scout troop with her husband, I believe, her husband moved all the contents with carts down the road, moved it in. And since they shared with the building, they were always worried they might have a grease. Where's Stacy? Stacy here? You ever worry about grease fires here? No, not on the list of worries anymore. It was back then. So grease fire. The floors were a little uneven. If you put a cart by the door, it would roll out onto the street and the sidewalk. The picture book collection was on a shelf by the front windows. If it rained, we had to move it because there was a gap in the windows and the rain would come in. So it was roughing it, but it was a place. and it wasn't being torn apart like the bank building was. This is about 1968. Only about a year later, it was approved to build the building over on Harriet Street, which is where I remember it being in the 80s. It's approved. A couple dates here, 69. There's Alice again, and in front of the building, which is now, I think, the Redeemer Bible Church, if I'm getting that right. And it was the food pantry in the basement for a while. They got this building built. They had 7,500 books or so. Shirley, now Canoodle? Canoodle. I'll just do the opposite of what I think every time. Canoodle. Here they are, students moving it from the main cafe into the new building, box by box, and the open house was at 69. It's a very pretty building. Here's some shots from the inside. If you remember, I remember this from being a little kid. There's Shirley again, putting books up. These are all over here if you want to see them closer afterwards. This I did not know about, but apparently there's a time capsule in front from 19. Ruth remembered this.
In the wrong date.
Oh, the date is wrong. What was the right date? Do you know?
72.
Oh, this was done when the library. Okay, so ignore 76. This was 72.
For the Cosqueak.
For the Quasqueak, yeah, which is 72. So that is Walter Felder. That's apparently still there. So at some point we have to decide when we're going to open it up. And my part's almost done here. We're getting into the 80s, but I wanted to mention there were some other cute things in here. Like in 1979, there was a pet parade. So the library had to do, I feel like the Friends would be doing this stuff today. These kinds of fundraisers and things, but the library was actually doing it. And I don't know if anyone knows any of these kids here, but yeah, pet parade in August of 1979. Now I am going to hand it over to Debbie Bass, and we're going to hop up to 1980. Debbie, these are your parents, right?
Yes.
Good. I got the picture right. And she's going to tell you a story about why and how the Friends came along. Then Ruth's going to talk about the expansion in the late 80s, and then Stacy's going to talk about this building.
This picture, Marge and Webb Dudley, my parents. My sister Jean's over there. This was taken at our son's wedding. So, wow. My husband and I were raised in Madison, but after we got married, we moved away for 12 years. And when we came back to Wisconsin, we bought a house on Main Street. And we were thrilled, I was thrilled, that we were only half a block from the library. And for the Historical Society people, it was interesting for us, when we bought our house, it was never our house. Whenever we would tell anybody where we lived, they'd say, oh, that's the old Mattie Winkleman house. Anyway, the first thing I did was go get a library card. And my mom and dad and my sister spent a lot of time at the library. Got to know Shirley Canola pretty well. She told us Vane County was talking about budget cuts that would impact the library, maybe cutting short hours and things. So we decided to do something about that, the four of us. In the fall of 1981, we sent a letter to about 250 individuals and businesses explaining the situation and asking for help. We also put an ad in the Verona Press and invited people who might want to start a Friends of the Library organization, or maybe restart it, I don't remember if there was one beforehand or not. So we did meet, and several community members joined us, and we formed the first board of the newly formed Friends of the Library. And of those, I'm not sure how many of these people were at that meeting, but they were Jean and me, Martin McDudley, Mary Hudson, Doreen Stewart, Marjorie Westergaard, Marion Sweet, Ruth Jensen, Kay Dunn, Paul McQuillan, Phil Salkin, and Bill Kingler. We were all of us were involved for the first few weeks. Bill Kingler was our first president, and Phil Salkin was the next one. Over the years, we all took turns being president, and officers worked very hard compiling our bylaws and constitution and trying to get a tax exempt from the state. And I never did find any information of whether we actually got it or not, or when we did, but we finally did get it. We solicited donations, and by the end of November 1981, we had collected almost $1,000. By January 12, 1982, we had accumulated a little over $2,200 and had received our articles of incorporation from the Secretary of State. So we had a meeting, our first quarterly meeting in March of '82, and handed $1,000 to the library and put the rest in a savings account. We all had, we had quarterly meetings, and they all was involved on a meal. One of our first meetings was held at Jane Piercy's restaurant. You remember that? The feeding station? It's in the round building next to the Care Center. She provided the food, and we charged $5.95 for the meal, and only could invite 65 people because it was a small place. Another one we had was catered and held in the ballroom of the railroad crossing, which you've seen before. So, but we did a lot more than hold meetings and eat. We sponsored an author's fair and an artist fair. I'm not sure when that happened, but it was one of the things we did. These were fundraisers, but mostly held to promote the library. We had annual book sales, which were lots of work, and would yield about $700. Now we have a permanent book sale corner in our library here, and we make way more than that. So, in the meantime, we still spent time at the library and realized its limitations. A picture of the library, you would see the shelves were high. My mom and dad couldn't reach the top shelves or the bottom shelves, so they could only get books that were in the middle. So we dreamed of having a much larger space. And Ruth Jensen decided to do something about that. And so Ruth is going to talk.
Well, I have a little more to say than Debbie does, as usual. So I'm going to cover the history of the addition to the library. Only covers 1986 through 1988, just 3 years. But it was an important time because the city was growing rapidly, but in addition to that, the city didn't have very much money. They were strapped for cash. But we needed, excuse me, there was a dire need for additional library space because the building that was built in 1969 was absolutely overcrowded. And you have to understand as I talk that it just wasn't me that was doing this. It was a whole group of people, but I personalize it because these are my recollections of that 3-year time period. So in 1986, the library that was built in 69, as I said, was running out of room. What seemed like a logical solution was an addition that would double the size of a library and include a basement for the community to use. There was sufficient land at that corner, and one of the pictures I think shows that, or maybe something that's going to be on the slide later. This whole lot would be extended from that building. So the Friends of the Verona Public Library had a low-key campaign to get the community involved. And one of the things we did was to construct or design a logo. And you all know the blue and white library sign with the reader in the book. Well, we developed one that had 2 readers and 2 books to symbolize the closeness of the friends and how they supported the library. We also made buttons. This is BOLT, Build Our Library Today, with a lightning bolt going down through the center to symbolize the need for quick action. So relatively speaking, it was quick. In 3 years, we had the addition. We handed these out to all the patrons and anybody else that would take one to wear it to. And it was because of the pins and the logo that were made by Park Printing that I became really involved with the Dudley and the Bassetts. And I could go on and on and on about what they did for this whole effort. In my opinion, if naming rights for a library was based on contributions, Park Printing Library would have been across the entrance instead of what we had, because they just did everything. No matter what we asked for, they were there. And I want to say my involvement, or should I say my immersion into this whole project, was because I was on both the library board and the Friends board at the time. The state of Wisconsin has set monies aside for building new libraries, and they kept pushing us to come up with a grant so that we could get the $125,000, which was a standard gift to building. And so Jackie Rockweiler, Bill Bernhagen, and I were on a committee to write the grant. And they awarded the grant to us, and then we went to the city, and the city said, sorry, we're not going to give you any money to build the library. So the grant, we had to return the grant. So the next year, in 1987, at the urging of the Wisconsin Library Association again, they said, write the grant. So we did, and this time, at this time, the city was really strapped with financial problems, and they didn't want to raise taxes. I think they said it would increase everyone's tax about $54, which seems like a lot for our small building. But on a close vote, they finally agreed to pass it. Part of their decision, I believe, was because they were getting a lot of pressure from the senior citizens for them to have a space to meet. So with the basement that covered the whole new addition, or was under the whole new addition, that would be a place, and they were happy to go along with that. I don't recall the exact figure, but I think it was around $400,000. I thought closer to 350, but there was one stipulation that the Friends had to raise $50,000 to furnish the library. So, and Jessie has mentioned Shirley Gutnick-Knodel, and she had been with the library since 1969. And she was maybe not always the smoothest person to deal with. She really wanted a library addition. She kept pushing for it, and the council wasn't too happy with her showing up all the time asking for it. And shortly into this building project, she fell ill with cancer. She was able to attend the groundbreaking, and that was one of the pictures that she showed, in October of 1987, but within months she was gone.
There she is, Ruth. I just put a picture up there.
Oh,
There.
good. Yep, that's it. That's Shirley. At the time, she was wearing a wig because she had been through quite a few cancer treatments. So she didn't get to see her dream come true. So Jackie and the library board, the Friends board, and the 3 library staff, Monica Denauer, who was appointed interim director, and Virginia Pitts, you always remember her with her beautifully coiffed hair, and Jill Steinmetz took over making most of the decisions for the project. We worked with the architect right down to the smallest detail. One of the smaller details, but it was so important at the time, was to figure out how we were going to house the new technology of VHS tapes. So we decided they were too valuable to just put on shelves. So into the desk, the checkout counter, we went to a lot of trouble designing slots for these tapes and we had drawers and drawers. As you know, it wasn't very long. no more VHS tapes, so they reconfigured the space for something else. So meanwhile, the Friends had no idea how they would accomplish the fundraising goal. They needed a warm body to lead the effort. Apparently, my being on the library board and just having been assigned the role of president of the Friends somehow made me a qualified candidate. No one seemed concerned that I didn't have a clue about fundraising. So, armed with a single book from the library on fundraising, we jumped into the project. It was a small group of friends, as I said. Number one was Park Printing, the Dudleys and the Basses, Jackie Brockweiler, Dorothy Enlow, who had been a head librarian at the high school, and Marge Westergaard that you mentioned before, who was really a trooper for everything, was a state reference librarian before she retired. And then the three librarians. This nucleus were the ones that undertook this huge undertaking without a library director. There were other individuals from the community that would work on tasks briefly when we asked them to do something. So at first, the major effort was centering on getting the community involved, making them aware of what we were trying to do, because we would be asking for money shortly. For starters, we had the Boy Scout. Jesse, do you have that?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, we had a Boy Scout named Dan Kittleson,
There he is.
who was looking for an Eagle Scout project. So we had him construct this 4x8 sign, and we had a stack of books and the thermometer with $50,000 at the top. And our first book was called Great Expectations. And so each time some more money came in, he painted another book or two as it went up the line. And he also made 4 sandwich boards for us and put them around the town, so when we had an event, we could let the community know what was going on. And Debbie mentioned an author fair we had, which was a lot of work, but a lot of fun. It was not really a fundraiser, but again, to get the community involved. We had 20 area writers who happily accepted the invitation to do this. Because as one of them told me, our job is such a solitary one, it's just really nice to get in the same room as other authors. So 2 of the authors that I remember, since I was doing the calling, was Janet Shaw, who was so sweet on the phone, and she said, oh, I'll come out. She was a writer for American Doll books, and one of our big names. And the other was a teenager named Kevin Hengus, who was eager to show off his cartooning and his fledgling writings to the other writers. And everybody knows Kevin Hengus now. He's internationally famous for his children's books. I still laugh at one of the unsuccessful attempts to put the word out, and I think it was for the author fair. Since I don't have a picture, I can't verify that, but I think it was. This is kind of a lengthy little thing. It involved a long sign, long enough, in fact, to reach across Highway 18 and 151. Or I thought that would be a good idea because the fundraising book said, and we believed everything it said, that we could call the local power and light company and ask if they were hanging a sign for us. I thought, how bold is that? So anyway, across Verona Avenue, just like in front of Mobile, we had this sign hung. It was huge, plastic with flaps in it to let the wind go through. And remember, this was 30 years ago, and there wasn't the technology to print these signs, so they had to be made by hand. nor were there computerized letter cutters like would have facilitated it. And now today, Park Printing would have said, oh yeah, we can print a sign for you, because they have that capability. So the sign was so big, and I cut all the letters by hand out of colored contact paper, and then I laid the sheet off across my basement, and I crawled around putting all the letters on. Got the sign finished. But prior to this, we had to obtain permission from the State Department of Transportation, since it was their highway. And surprisingly, they said, yeah, you can put a sign up, although there's a rule that says you can't put anything over a state highway. But we'll make an exception, which was fine. And the power company also agreed to come out with their cherry picker and put up the sign, and they hooked it with ropes to one of their poles. And the sign did look amazing. You have to take my word for it, because no one has a picture of it. I remember not everybody had a cell phone with a camera in every pocket today. But what I do remember was the very night that we hung the sign, a terrific wind came through the city. And the sign must have just jumped right on one of those updrafts, and it was never seen again. I've often wondered where it went. It was huge. But no one called us. So in our fundraising, every little bit of money helped. We asked the community for book donations for resale, and then we were overwhelmed with the books that came in because we had no place to store them, nor to sort them for the sale. But we held the sale in the old Legion, which is now a parking lot on Park Lane. I think it's Park Lane we call it, or Park Street, one of the two. We hosted new book sales at the grade school for children. We even had TV coverage, a whole 1 minute and 10 seconds. We had a slot on Elmer Childress's weather program from Channel 15 when he agreed to do the broadcast that night from Verona. So we were right up there. And we sold note cards depicting the watercolor painting of the Sharp House. The Sharp House was a hot topic at the time because it was about to be razed. And Jill Steinmetz was our children's librarian, and her husband was a watercolor painter, so he painted this, the picture of the Sharp House, and we made it, our printing made it into note cards, and we sold the note cards, and he dedicated it to Shirley Knodel. And the picture is hanging in the history room right down the hall here. So during our campaign, we asked businesses and individuals for outright donations with a promise to put their names on plaques that we were going to attach to the end of all the bookshelves. We listed every single person who contributed. That's a lot of bookkeeping. But the plaques are now hanging in that same room with the picture. Dorothy Enlow was one of the movers and shakers of this project, took it upon herself to ask the civic organizations for money. And she raised $12,000 from those organizations. One of them was dissolving, and they gave us, I don't know, $7,000, $8,000 that was left in their coffers when they disbanded. And then a local business supply company, a nice guy here that lived in Verona, said, well, he could buy the shelving at a discount for us. So that was a big help. And another family whose wife and son had died gave us a $1,200 memorial that we bought the history cabinet for. If you remember that lovely history display we had every month at the library, it was well liked. So gradually the stack of books on Dan's side grew higher. And when we reached $4,200, I proposed one final crazy idea from the fundraising book. It suggested a phone blitz, phoning a large number of people in a short period of time. And my hope was to raise $8,000 that night so that we would be done with this. And so, as always, park printing. Do I like park printing or not? They taught me how to use the computer. I remember the very first day I was typing up the Friends newsletter every month. Debbie said, "Oh, come down to park printing. You can use our computers to write this." So I'm used to the old typewriter and I make mistakes and I hate it. Well, she introduced me to the computer and I loved it because I could go and my mistake would be gone. So the first time I printed up a newsletter, I said, "Now what do I do with it?" She came over and she hit the button and it disappeared. And I said, "Debbie, I just spent an hour or so on this." She said, "Don't worry, Ruth." And she went like that. And it reappeared. To me, that was magic. And it was John Bassett arranged for me to have my first computer. And the first time I used it, I worked for about an hour on a project and I lost it. It just disappeared. I was very upset. So I called out to his house and I said, "John, what did I do? What did I do?" And whoever was at the home at the time said, "Well, John's not here. He's out in Jackson Hole with Jane." And I said, "Oh, I had this." Oh, they said, "Call him out there. He'll be happy to tell you what to do." So I called him out in Jackson Hole, and he walked me through finding this important document that I lost. So anyway, those are just asides. So as I said, Park Printing was there to help. They opened their business for a place to us to have this phone-a-thon. They rearranged their desks and their tables and their chairs so that we could create the phone bank. In addition to the phones at the printing office, several more were provided by the local Mount Vernon telephone company. Even more impressive was they sent out their cherry picker and hung more phone lines outside of Park Printing and gave us more phones so that we could do this. Now, isn't that bold? So on a Sunday evening, we took the Verona phone book and tore out the pages of Verona community, and we passed out the different sections to the different tables. And volunteers began calling. It was really tight quarters, so it's surprising we didn't have more mistakes happening than we did. But one of the mistakes was that a number of people got called twice and said, "You just called me 5 minutes ago." But that, all in all, it was really a fun canvas, and we enjoyed doing it. So we didn't think it was such a crazy idea in the end. And we raised $7,000 with another $1,000 that came in later from people who didn't want to make the decision on the phone. So that was our $8,000. So, and that made 50. In 1988, and just 1 year to the week of the groundbreaking, and 30 years ago this month, we held the dedication ceremony of the addition. It was jointly done with the senior club, who was very happy to move into the basement. There was a large storage area in the basement that where we stored books for the next book sale, and that gradually gave way to the food pantry in that one room. And then the seniors eventually left the basement. They went to Sugar Creek Apartments, and the food pantry took over the whole basement. And then since then, 2 churches have been in there. The city still owns the building. So eventually, so I guess that's about what I wanted to say, that this addition served us well for 18 years, and now we're in this amazing facility. So thank you. And thank you all for coming.
Hello, I'm Stacey Bergman. I'm the current library director. So I started working here back in 2005, so I was just briefly working in the old library building, and then I got to be part of the construction and move to this facility. And so I was mostly in the children's area for 10 years, and then became director in 2015. So here we have the beautiful building that we're currently in. And here's some architectural drawings of how they envisioned it. So back in 2004, the city council agreed that the library, the community had outgrown the old library space, and they were ready to build a new one. So after several sites were considered, it landed here, and that was part of a deal with Dane County. So we're in Badger Prairie Parkland right now, and they traded it this for, I think it's 4.3 acres now, for a well over to the Badger Prairie Healthcare Facility. So we got a fantastic location overlooking the prairie, and that's kind of how that came to me. So here's some more drawings. Dimension 4 was our architect. They've built several libraries in the area. Here's the groundbreaking in 2005. Right here we have, this is Susan Hedrick. She was the director at the time. And I believe that's Marge Westergaard. And I can't make out, because of the hats and the shades, who everyone else in this photo is. But if anyone else knows, please let me know. And here are some photos of the building under construction. It took about a year. I like this one. It really shows how cool. This is a very large building. So the previous library was 9,000 square feet, and we are currently at 33,000 square feet. So it was a big deal to move over here. Just some more photos. So we had to pack up the old library over on Franklin Street, and we didn't have any Boy Scouts with carts. We had an actual moving company, which we were very grateful for. So we emptied out the new shelves, and some of the shelves were actually reused, the metal parts, not the ends. So they're still in this building to this day. We've got some people packing up. And then things are starting to get put together over here. So this is the library castle that's over in the children's area. It came on its own semi from, I believe it was built in Florida. And here we have children's librarian, Jan Gessler, who was children's librarian for 17 years. I don't know if everyone remembers her, or she helped raise a generation of kids to be readers. So here she is. And there's some custom artwork, murals painted in the children's area. So this is the artist, Julie Husted, who did that work. So there was a lot of excitement about the new building. People were dying to get in here. But as we all know, moving is not that much actual fun. And one of my favorite, so we were here, we were dirty, we were sweaty. Children's area was completed first. And so the rest of the building was still getting drywall and carpet, and there were electricians running around and plumbers and all kinds of stuff. We had to keep on schedule, so we put the books onto the shelves in the children's area, and then wrapped them all in plastic, which is over here. And when the movers, we were just driving them crazy because we were in the way, the building wasn't finished. We weren't moving into a finished building, we were moving into a construction project. And one day the movers said to me that they would rather move pianos all day, every day, than ever come back to this library. And I said, "Are you kidding?" And they said, "No." So, anyway, maybe the Boy Scouts would have been more cheerful, I'm not sure. But we got them all in, we got it all in. And a lot of the comments we got when we first opened were, where are all the books? Because we built the building with shelf space to last for 20 to 25 years. And so when we moved in, if this is the shelf, it only had about this many books on it. So it looked very empty, but that was purposeful so that we didn't just outgrow it in a few years. And now if you look around, we've definitely filled out the space. So, there we go. And here's our grand opening back in May 1st, 2006. We have then Mayor Hokemer over here, and our longtime library board president, Steve Rundy. He just stepped off of the board this year, but he was on for, I believe, 17 years or 18 years. So he shepherded through this building project. This is staff. We've got Miss Virginia, who made the move over to the new building and then retired. So she was a joy to know and work with. Oh, and we do have Boy Scouts. They were at the grand opening. So.
Can you point out Rhonda after she did all that history
Oh, yeah.
work?
So this is Rhonda Evenson. She has been working at the library since she was in high school. So she's over 25 years here so far and counting. She very well may be our longest, library employee ever. So she knows a lot about, she's a Verona native and grew up here, lives here, works here. And so she's kind of our library history buff. And so she coordinated the local history collection that we house here and helped give a lot of resources for today's presentation. Oh, and we have some friends at the grand opening. We've got Marge and Debbie and Doreen. Just some photos of the outside, or these are just from when we first opened. It's a beautiful building. It was very fun to work here. These people would just walk in the doors and they would just stop and say, wow. So I think we're incredibly fortunate to have this facility. And it really does have a wow factor. You walk in with the gorgeous windows overlooking the prairie. So a little bit about this building. It's 33,000 square feet. We were able to add study rooms and meeting rooms that people can use. They're very popular. We have just over 100,000 books, videos, and audiobooks. Something we did not have previously was free fast Wi-Fi. Getting into the modern era, we do not have any VHS tapes anymore. I know. We have computers and we check out laptops and Chromebooks, and every year over 230,000 people visit the library, or it's the same people, repeat visitors, so we have 230,000 visits. Librarians answer over 30,000 individual questions each year, and we check out just under 600,000 books per year. So that is for the population of Verona, that is a lot of books. You guys are good readers. We are part of the South Central Library System, which is 7 counties. So we share books, we get delivery every day, we share online resources. So you can get a book from any one of 54 libraries delivered here to you. So all our books get carted around the county in these lovely red buckets. And they, if you ever see them driving around town, they have these red trucks and they say, follow me to your local library. We also have a lot of online resources. And we add about 10,000 books and other items to the collection every year. So that's why our shelves fill up. We're also a very, as you can hear from the noise in the lobby, a very vibrant library. So we have a lot of children and families visit. And what's a little bit unusual for a library, most libraries check out more adult materials than kids materials, but we are opposite. We check out around 52% of our book checkout is for kids. We also offer 500 programs a year now for children and families, including weekly story times, performers, crafts, and more. And we have one of the busiest summer reading programs in the summer, and that is a lot in part to our friends who support that. This summer we had over 3,000 participants. So if you think, again, about the population of Verona, that's an enormous, that's like all the kids. So that's just a picture. So this is, this is 2 summers ago. The theme was, every hero has a story, and every little sticker that represents the window in that skyline is a kid who participated in the summer reading program. It's a really visual presentation of how many people this affects. We're also very committed to early literacy. We started 1,000 books before kindergarten program.
Oh, it's going right.
Off the board. So the idea of this is, in order to be ready for kindergarten, kids need to be read 1,000 books between the ages of 0 and 5, and then they'll have the skills, the pre-reading skills they need to be successful readers themselves. And so far, in the past few years that this program's been going, we've had 1,900 children participate, so that's fantastic. We also do a lot with teens. It's not just about the cute little kids. We do a lot with teens as well. This is a recent escape room that we hosted. We have a weekly teen anime club. Anime is like Japanese comic books, which is really popular. We also have a lot of volunteers, and I know probably some volunteers in this audience as well. We have a large army of volunteers who help us out. Volunteers spend about 2,000 hours collectively doing the pick list, helping with summer reading program, just keeping everything running smoothly. So we really appreciate all their help. And this is just a little comparison over the years. So back in 1996, we had 6,000 people, 6,000 to 8,000 people in our service population in Verona. And we checked out 150,000 books, and we did 22 library programs in a year. And then if you look down, so 2006, we moved to this building. We've got a population of Verona of about 9,000, and the extended service population of this library is about 17. And now we're checking out 382,000 books a year and doing 300 programs. And then now Verona just keeps growing. So this year, got 13,000 to 18,000 people in the area, checking out 559,000 books and doing 930 programs a year. So that's really stepped up a lot. This is a very busy place. This is just a little infographic that has a lot of that same information. The thing that I really like about this community is how supportive and how literate we all are. 85% of our service population has a library card, which is fantastic. So if you don't have one, just go get one at the front desk. They're free. And then just a few highlights from over the years. Oh, this is actually a video. Here we go. So in 2011, even though we built the building in 2005 and 6, in 2011 we were already remodeling to incorporate RFID technology. So there's a little sticker with a chip in each book, and then when they're returned, they go through this automatic sorting system. This is what it looks like from the inside. And they get sorted according to their help books or case books. Yep. So there we go. That's my riveting video footage. In 2013, we are extremely honored to be recognized as Wisconsin Library of the Year for the Wisconsin Library Association. And that here we have pictured Director Brian Simons and Mayor Hochmer. That was a big honor, and that was a big point of pride for people in the community to come in and say, we know our library is the best library. So that was a big thrill. And then in 2015, we started an endowment fund. So we began fundraising. Our goal was to raise $100,000, and then we had a matching grant with Madison Community Foundation. So we had 18 months to raise the popular, so we had to raise $100,000 and to receive $50,000. And we met that goal, so it was fantastic. And part of how we met that goal was we started an annual 5K run walk and kids run. And there's some photos from there. This is actually my husband in this gingerbread costume. So you can end up volunteering to do all kinds of things at the library. He said that was weirdly one of his favorite pictures of himself. But it's a lot of fun anyway. So we have a lot of fun over here. And then, so with the endowment fund, we get a disbursement each year. And so with the very first one, last year we had a mammoth on display for the month of March. So we had a mammoth and a saber-toothed tiger, so it was fantastic. We called our month March Mammoth. So here we go. And it looked so great up in the big windows up there. And one of the great things about this building is that we have that giant space in the center with the windows, and it's really flexible, so we can have a theater company come in and do a performance, or we can just have it set up for quiet reading, or we can have some prehistoric mammoth come by. So it really has allowed us to do a lot of exhibits, which a lot of libraries don't have. So we're bringing museum quality exhibits to Verona on a regular basis. So that's something we're really proud of. And then last year, Steve Grundy was honored by the Wisconsin Library Association as Library Trustee of the Year. And I don't have the year, but I know Jackie Rockweiler was also
89, and then she was the county 1 year, county trustee, and the next year, right after we completed the addition, the next year she was Wisconsin trustee of the year.
Okay, so we have some really great library board members. We've gotten statewide recognition. And then one of the other fun new things we've been doing at the library is we now have a community engagement librarian, so an outreach librarian who goes around town to different community events and checks out books. And one of the things that we were able to get the grant through EPIC and then also support from the Friends group is a book bike. So it's a mobile, portable library, tiny, that hooks, it's a bike trailer, and then it opens up and we have all kinds of books in it, and then we also bring a Wi-Fi hotspot and a laptop so we can make library cards, we can check out books all over town. So that's been kind of a fun new thing that was around. I don't know if anybody saw it around town this summer, but we were at the farmer's market, at different schools and daycares, we were at Verona Fall Fest, so a lot of community events. So I have like a million photos and it was hard to pick some. So I just wanted to do a quick wrap up. What's been going on for the last 12 years since we've been in this building? We've read a lot of books. That's our whole staff from a few years ago. We made music together. We learned about people and cultures. We've experimented with science. We've played ball. That's an exhibit we had called Pride and Passion, the African American baseball experience, and we actually had a vintage baseball game over in the field across the street where everybody played by 1890 rules. It was really cool. So that's a contemporary photo, but it's black and white. We hung out with dinosaurs. In 2011, we had a big dinosaur exhibit that's Delta, oh shoot, I'm so bad at dinosaur names. Anyway, that's Delta the dinosaur. She's a cousin of a T-Rex, and she's would have lived in along river banks. And that would have been the habitat. So, got a lot of people in for that. We hammed it up a little bit. That's from one of our famous library sleepovers. We met some cool characters. We helped each other out. We've been running Food for Fines for the last few years. That food gets donated to the food pantry. And then the cows. So there's 2 goats and a cow in that photo. And one of the summer reading program. So each kid who signed up for the summer reading program one summer got to choose whether they would donate either 2 goats or a cow to Heifer International. So that was kind of a feel-good one. And these cuties are just here spreading good cheer at the library on, like, I think it was International Peace Day. So we've had many special events. We've explored imaginary world with wizards and vampires. So these are some teens playing Quidditch, if you guys are Harry Potter fans. We've created some art, picked up some tech skills. We've gone back in time, and this is Tom Gearing, AKA Benjamin Franklin, over here. We've learned from each other and came together as a community to learn, discover, connect, and enjoy. So you can see sometimes we really pack this place.
Yeah, reindeer event.
Yep. Yeah, come back for reindeer on December 8th. Sometimes things get a little messy, but that is just all a part of being part of a vibrant community of learners. And we are so glad that we had all these people to support us all these years, to like the friends, to help us get to where we are now. So, all right, that's all I've got.